This is Kelly, and I think that everything that's been said is really helpful. And Jonathan, you made a comment earlier that the best way to learn to help new users is to find what their problems are. And I think that there's a bit of a disconnect in that even myself, probably being the newest user of LawTech, I've still used it for like 5 years. And so just like the accessibility issue, speaking to those that are actually blind was really helpful. And I think speaking to some new users would be really helpful. But I put a thing in the chat about Overleaf being potentially like the most beneficial recipe book because for LawTech, because it's like going to a class where you get to make the recipe and eat it too. And with Overleaf, you can instantaneously eat or read the output from LawTech. And I think that's really helpful as a new user.
I'm really grateful for that, Kelly. And I sort of have a mix. I'm a bit concerned that Overleaf it does what it does very well, and in some sense that's really nice. And in the other sense, it can sort of lead to atrophy. It's like living near a good cheap restaurant. You forget how to cook, and we may become too dependent on Overleaf. Oh, this is being recorded. I didn't say that. And but certainly to reach people, Overleaf is an easy place to reach people, I think. I've no doubt that if you wrote some good documentation and said to Overleaf, here it is, you can use it, they might very well use it, and they'd reach a lot of people. Overleaf has got a lot of users. I think Overleaf is the biggest, so to speak, concentration of users.
I think it goes back to the generational gap, though. Like if you expect teens and new professionals that don't want to learn how to become computer programmers to dive into all the details of LawTech, then they're just always going to go to the restaurant and choose takeout. But if you give them a little taste of it, those that want to eventually learn still can.
So in a certain sense, perhaps what we need is LaTeX for dummies. You know, I mean, without demeaning our audience. By the way, there's a book published, I think its title is Ventriloquism for Dummies. But a sort of a beginner's guide to LaTeX. I mean, a real beginner's guide to LaTeX. And I'm sure that lots of them exist, but I think that's more than a 3-month project. Because it's not, writing it in some sense is the easy part. Getting it out there into the community may not be so easy, but good recommendations. That would be something that will help beginners, I hope. And I've written down buddies and mentors and code review and best practice. And I'm not sure how we're getting outside 3 months there. So 3 months takes us to 2022. That's a lot of twos, isn't it? And I don't know what the community or the 7 of us here could do or want to do in those 3 months, but there's enough ideas here that might allow something to be done, just a little bit. So I'll write some of this up. The video is easy. Creating the video is easy. That's just YouTube. I'll write some of this up and see if we can't summon some forces from somewhere to take this forward. I've said more than enough as usual, so I'll be quiet and let anybody else that wants to say their closing remarks and then we're finished, and then I'll turn the recording off, and anybody that wants to go can go, and anybody that wants to stay can stay.
I still think, go ahead.
I remember when I was starting out, I started with a document called A Short Introduction to LaTeX, but it was in German, written by someone in Austria. And I just looked on Google, and in about a second, I found a much newer version from this year, on which he's a co-author in English with regard to LaTeX 2E. So it's an expanded version of what I learned from. So that might be an interesting starting point for some people. It was the version I learned from back then, which was in German, was substantially shorter than Lamport's book, for example. You know, it was really the minimum you need to know type thing. And yeah, I put up a link to a modern English version, but that might be interesting for some people to, as a starting point.
I was going to say that there's no lack of good information out on the web, and you do have to search for it though. And it is not collected too much anywhere, but some of the good resources I found were things like you search for how do I write, and then substitute what you're trying to write. And if you're lucky, you find something, and that lays out how somebody did it and how you can do it, and that gets you started. But I think a fundamental problem still is related to the fact that if it's so difficult to get new people to want to use LaTeX, that difficulty is inherent in what you need to do to help people that are already using it use it better. And I don't know the answer to that.
Philip, was this the book you referred to, Kompakt für LaTeX by Reinhard Vonneberger?
No.
This one is very small. It's 140 pages and came out in 1988, which is a long time ago.
A long time ago, yeah. No, the one I referred to was written by Hubert Partel, and he's one of the co-authors on the one which is 139 pages, so about the same size. I put a link in the chat. So that's at least a modern version of LaTeX as opposed to that 1988 version.
Yeah, I've also directed students with low budgets to the Kopka and Daly editions that provide in a single volume a pretty good overview of a lot of the basic stuff that people need.
Yeah, I've used the Kopka and Daly quite a bit, but it's substantially more than the minimum a beginner needs to know. Mm-hmm. But it's a good second book to go to, definitely.
I have a question that may I may not form it right, but I've always told people that LaTeX was basically a bunch of macros built on top of tech. Is that correct?
Yeah.